let me make this point. Even if you think you're diversified by just owning the S&P, that diversification has taken a major hit, because if we go back a decade or so, you'll see that info technology, which is a lot of the companies we're talking about, was only 10% of the S&P. Now it's 32%. So you're going to have to look outside that to diversify. Now, it's a greater diversification than I have, but also, when you take a look at managers, 75 to 80%, to your point, underperform the S&P every year. And guess what? It's not the same. A lot of them are the same, but my point is that even those that have outperformed just said, oh, they come on and say, oh, I'm going to overweight tech, or I'm going to underweight this, which to me is a bunch of crap, right? Because all you're saying is I'm managing to the S&P rather than managing to return. That, you'll see those that have that uber performance in a year fall back to below the 75%.
Let's bring in Bryn, who's with us to talk about Nvidia hitting $4 trillion. Certainly one of the more high-profile members of the committee to be in this name for a very long time. What does this move mean to you? What does this milestone mean, Bryn?
I think the milestone is where it's incredible is, Nvidia's numbers won't come out until the end of August. But you have a $4 trillion company that's going to grow revenues this quarter at 51% and earnings at 46%. So I think they're on a different calendar year. Our fiscal year in 2026, this company probably does $5.50 of earnings. It's just incredible to have a company this size still growing revenues and earnings so quickly. And I think we have to remember, though, it's almost been exactly a year where Nvidia has been basically sideways between 140 and 100. So you had to be patient over the last year. I've been selling calls, but now that you've had this base that it's broken out of, and I think that really, to me, what's catalyzed a lot of things is when Mark Zuckerberg has come out and is poaching these engineers for $100 million signing bonuses. And so if you think that AI is getting long in the tooth, look again. I think it's just like going in from third to fourth gear from these hyperscalers spending, which we'll all hear about in the next couple weeks. So I think it's really interesting and exciting, not interesting, but exciting about Nvidia that it's finally broken out of that one-year base. And so you could easily see this name creep up into the 200s because of this strong earnings and revenue growth. So I think we're in this moment of time, and Nvidia, as Joe, we talked about the other day, Nvidia, I think, will continue to be a strong performer towards the end of the year.
I think absolutely. I agree. Technically, you're seeing a breakout, and this is where the spending is. And let's talk for a second about Broadcom, because they don't get enough credit for contributing to building out the AI infrastructure. Yes, we want faster chips, we want faster processing, but you also need faster networking, and that's exactly what they're doing with the XPU. They're delivering faster networking, and it is all right now a world in which the spending is being geared toward those that can actually provide the opportunity where you don't have to stack the chips, where one chip ultimately is enough. And that's why they're in the sweet spot. I don't see the spending at any point dissipating. We've had moments over the last year where we thought that you'd see a slowdown in spending. Steve, you've been accurate in pointing out you didn't believe that was going to occur. And just look at Apple. Look at the reasoning behind why Apple is currently being punished, because they don't seem to have a steady direction on AI.
They don't innovate, as I've said many times. But look, the story, let's not forget the base story in AI. It's the fastest adoption of any technology in history, faster than the internet, which was free to users. A lot of users are paying subscriptions for ChatGPT and others. So it will continue to go. But what's most interesting about it, despite the major CapEx budgets, it's not only the ones on the receiving end, like Nvidia, it's the ones on the spending end, and you typically don't see that. So it's a very unusual time.
I thought Melius Research had an interesting note, and Bryn, I'll get your take on this too, because they look at the landscape, and I think partly to Joe's point, they're in agreement where they're like, okay, you want to continue to buy AI semis, but they say to exercise caution on SaaS names. They want you to continue to buy the Nvidias, they want you to buy AMD, and they want you to buy Joe's Broadcom, but they don't really want you to buy Salesforce, nor do they want you to buy Workday or Adobe. They see where the puck maybe is going, and they want you to go there. Do you agree with that call?
I think that, we'll see. I mean, Salesforce is expensive. Obviously, Mark Benioff, they're spending a ton of money with their agentics, but I think it's an open field. So I think the report is sound, but I still think it's early days, though. Obviously, Salesforce, ServiceNow, all of those companies do so much more than just agentics or agents, et cetera. But I do think, though, that there will be winners and losers. And as we remember going back to 2012, the early days of the cloud, no one believed in it. No one believed in it at all. But it actually allowed Microsoft to re-rate, Amazon to re-rate. And so I feel like we're in these early days where we're not going to know who the winners and losers are. So I wouldn't take this piece and say Salesforce or ServiceNow, but I would just say it's early days, and so there'll be a lot more winners and losers. But I think Nvidia, Microsoft, Palantir are clearly going to be the winners in the space over the next couple of years.
Bryn, good to have you on. Thanks for jumping on to talk about Nvidia. Had to hear from you today. Bryn Talkington back with us in the days ahead. I am almost certain of that. More SaaS names. I mean, you no longer own Salesforce.
No.
I think many of our viewers probably do. But you do have Oracle and ServiceNow and Viva and DocuSign and Zoom if you want to talk about so-called, SaaS names.
Yeah, and clearly the winner there has been Oracle. I think, Jimmy, you're participating in that with me as well.
I've had it for a couple of years.
Leader. There are some other names, DocuSign, Zoom, that
by the way,
recovered.
Oracle, your Oracle, up 88% since the bottom. If you really want to know how powerful the AI trade has been, look beyond the mega caps, because the core weaves of the world are up 250%. Quantum computing, IonQ, which was a Bryn name that she brought to us originally, up 118%. Power names like Vertiv, Oracle 88, Vernova 86, Broadcom 78, Dell 72, Constellation Energy 68, Eaton and IBM respectively 43 and 31%. So you need to really look beyond the mega caps to see where the best gains have been.
Yes, and I think you're at a little bit of an inflection point. I think what we witnessed in the last 12 months was that there was this period in 2024 where software outperformed semis. And it was on the premise that software was now going to take the handoff on the tailwind of artificial intelligence advancing towards generative AI. I think now we're back at that inflection point where we're going to see the return, both in the form of sentiment and positioning, to the semiconductor names. One of my favorite semiconductor names, which is clearly breaking out, is KLA Corp. We do not own it in the Joe T. Obviously, we've owned it in the past, and it certainly will be a candidate when we rebalance at the end of
Joe,
July.
Do you have the other semi-caps? Do you have AMAT? We have AMAT. We've talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked about. So semi-equipment names, they're rebuilding the positioning. Yeah. They're seeing the momentum being reestablished once again. But I think it's an inflection point. I think Adam Parker on Closing Bell talked about this with you several months ago, where it was, okay, let's now go away from software names. Let's move into the semi names. And that's proving to have the fruition. But if I can really, it's Oracle that stands out in the software
If I can just point out that what you're describing has a lot more to do with sentiment than fundamentals, all right? The semi-cap equipment names, the theory behind that, the thesis has remained constant for several years. But they went through that period, as you pointed out, the 24, that nobody liked it. Now they're coming into vogue. And that happens with these subsectors. I do think as we're talking about these subsectors that you can pick stocks. Scott, forgive me, because I go to this often, but you didn't mention it. Cisco is in the early stages of what Oracle started to do 3 years ago. Oracle, prior to 3 years ago, was looked at as just a database company. They got this Oracle Cloud infrastructure going, and their multiples shot up from the high teens to now the low 30s. Cisco is in the early stages of doing the same thing, and for the same reason. The same drivers are there, which is you're building out all this infrastructure for AI. It's going to come to Cisco's benefit.